April 18, 1942, 11:23 a.m., over Tokyo Bay. Second Lieutenant Robert Hite watches his B-25 Mitchell bomber disintegrate around him. Japanese Zero fighters have been on them for 7 minutes, 20mm cannon shells ripping through aluminum like paper. The number 2 engine is smoking. Number 1 is losing oil pressure. The cockpit smells like burning hydraulic fluid and cordite. 14 hours ago, Hite was standing on the deck of the USS Hornet, 650 miles off the Japanese coast. Jimmy Doolittle's plan was simple: launch 16 B-25s from an aircraft carrier, bomb Tokyo, fly to safety in China. Simple. Except B-25s weren't designed to take off from carriers. Except they launched 200 miles early because Japanese patrol boats spotted them. Except now they don't have enough fuel to reach China. And except Japanese fighters are shredding Hite's aircraft over their own capital city. The bombardier, Lieutenant Jacob DeShazer, yells from the nose, "We're losing altitude." Hite knows. The controls are sluggish, hydraulics failing. The B-25 is dying. Behind him, over the intercom, the navigator reports, "Fuel's critical, maybe 30 minutes." Hite does the math. They're 800 miles from friendly territory, flying 180 miles per hour with one engine failing. The mathematics don't work. But Robert Hite didn't volunteer for the most dangerous mission in American military history because he was good at accepting impossible odds. He volunteered because someone had to hit back. 4 months earlier, December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor burns. 2,403 Americans dead. 8 battleships damaged or destroyed. The Japanese Empire controls the Pacific. Wake Island falls. Guam falls. The Philippines are surrounded. America is reeling. President Roosevelt demands a response, something visible, something that shows Japan isn't invincible. The problem, Japan is 5,000 miles from the nearest American base. No American bomber has the range to hit Tokyo and return. Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle proposes the impossible: load B-25 Mitchell bombers onto an aircraft carrier, launch them 400 miles from Japan, bomb Tokyo, fly to safety in China, and bail out over friendly territory. It's never been done. B-25s need 1,200 feet of runway to take off. Aircraft carriers have 450 feet of deck. The Navy says it's suicide. Doolittle asks for volunteers anyway. Robert Hite raises his hand. He's 23 years old, from Odell, Texas, joined the Army Air Corps in 1940, logged 300 hours in B-25s, enough to qualify as a co-pilot, not enough to know that what he's volunteering for has a 50% survival rate at best. Training begins in February 1942. The crews practice short takeoffs, loading the B-25s with maximum fuel and minimum weight. They remove armor plating, remove the lower gun turret, replace guns with broomsticks painted black. Every pound matters. On April 1, 1942, 16 B-25s are loaded onto the USS Hornet. The carrier leaves San Francisco under radio silence. Destination: 400 miles off the coast of Japan. The Doolittle Raid is happening.
April 18, 1942, dawn. The Hornet is 650 miles from Tokyo when Japanese patrol boats spot them. The plan called for launching at 400 miles, close enough that the B-25s could reach China after bombing. At 650 miles, the fuel margins disappear. Doolittle makes the call: launch immediately. At 8:20 a.m., the first B-25 roars down the Hornet's deck and claws into the sky with 15 feet of runway to spare. 15 more follow. Hite's aircraft, plane number 16, is last. They fly low, 50 feet above the water, under Japanese radar. At 11 a.m., they cross the Japanese coast. Tokyo appears ahead, the imperial capital, supposedly untouchable. Hite's bombardier releases their payload over an oil refinery. 500-pound bombs tumble toward the target. Direct hit. The refinery erupts in flames. That's when the Zeros arrive. Japanese fighters swarm from every direction. The B-25 has .50 caliber guns in the tail and nose. Not enough. Zeros make slashing attacks, 20mm cannons blazing. The number 2 engine takes a hit. Oil sprays across the windscreen. Hite pushes the throttles forward. The remaining engine screams. They need distance, need to reach the coast, need to get over water where the Zeros won't follow. The aircraft shudders. Another hit, this one in the fuselage. The engineer reports, hydraulics failing, fuel leak in the left wing. Hite glances at the fuel gauge, dropping fast. They're 50 miles from the coast, still over Japanese-controlled territory. The Zeros press the attack. Then, suddenly, they break off. The B-25 crosses the coastline. The Zeros turn back. Japanese fighters don't have the fuel to chase them over open water. Hite breathes. But the relief lasts exactly 30 seconds. The engineer's voice: "Fuel's critical. We've got maybe 20 minutes." They're 700 miles from the Chinese coast. At 180 miles an hour, that's 4 hours of flying. They have 20 minutes of fuel. Hite looks at his navigator. Options? There are no options. We bail out or we ditch. Ditching a B-25 in the Pacific means drowning. The aircraft sinks in under a minute. Bailing out means parachuting into the East China Sea, maybe 100 miles from land. Maybe. But Hite sees something else on the horizon. A small island, Japanese-occupied probably, but land. And on that island, parked near what looks like a small airstrip, he sees aircraft. Japanese bombers. Hite makes a decision that will define the rest of his life. We're going down there. The navigator stares at him. That's a Japanese base. I know. They'll capture us. Not if we're fast. Hite brings the dying B-25 down to 200 feet. The island grows larger. He can see details now. A small runway, 3 buildings, 2 aircraft parked near a hangar. Mitsubishi G4M bombers. Twin engine, long range. The Japanese call them Bettys. American pilots call them flying lighters because they explode when hit. But they have fuel and range. Hite's plan is insane. Land the B-25, survive the landing, get to one of those Japanese bombers, start it, take off before the Japanese garrison realizes what's happening. His crew thinks he's lost his mind. The bombardier, we don't speak Japanese. Hite, we don't need to. Engines work the same. The engineer, we've never flown a G4M. Hite, we're about to learn. The navigator says nothing. He's calculating their odds. They're approximately 0. But 0 is better than drowning in the Pacific. Hite lines up for approach. The B-25's landing gear is hydraulic. The hydraulics are shot. He'll have to belly land. 100 feet, 50 feet. The B-25 hits the runway at 110 miles an hour, skids 400 yards, and slams into a dirt embankment. The impact throws Hite against the instrument panel. His vision goes white, then red, then clears. Around him, the crew is moving. Out, now! They pile through the escape hatch. Japanese soldiers are running toward them from the buildings, maybe 200 yards away. Hite sprints toward the nearest G4M bomber. His crew follows. They have maybe 30 seconds before the Japanese arrive.
The G4M's canopy is open. Hite climbs into the pilot's seat. Everything is labeled in Japanese. The instrument panel is chaos, unfamiliar gauges, unknown switches, but some things are universal. Throttle, stick, rudder pedals. Hite finds what looks like ignition switches, 2 of them, 1 for each engine. He flips them. Nothing. The engineer climbs into the cockpit behind him. Fuel. Find the fuel selector. Hite scans the panel, sees a lever with Japanese characters. He pulls it, tries the ignition again. The left engine coughs, catches, roars to life. Then, the right. Outside, Japanese soldiers are 50 yards away, rifles raised. Hite doesn't know how to release the parking brake, doesn't know how to operate the flaps, doesn't know if the G4M has enough fuel to reach China. He shoves the throttles forward anyway. The G4M lurches. The parking brake, whatever's holding it, releases under the engine's power. The G4M starts rolling. Japanese soldiers open fire. Bullets punch through the thin aluminum skin. The bombardier yells, "They're shooting at us!" Hite, they're always shooting at us. 60 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour. The end of the runway rushes toward them. At 90 miles an hour, Hite pulls back on the stick. The G4M lifts off. They're airborne in a stolen Japanese bomber. Behind them, the island disappears. Ahead, 600 miles of open ocean. And after that, China. Maybe. The Mitsubishi G4M climbs to 3,000 feet. Hite has no idea how much fuel is in the tanks. The gauges are in Japanese. The numbers mean nothing. He picks a heading, west, toward China. The navigator crawls forward. We're flying a Japanese bomber. Hite, I noticed. If we encounter American fighters, they'll shoot us down. If we encounter Japanese fighters, they'll shoot us down. So what's the plan? Fly low, fly fast, don't get shot. Not much of a plan, but it's all they have. The G4M handles differently than the B-25. Heavier, more responsive in pitch. The engines run quieter. Hite makes adjustments, trims the aircraft, finds a cruise speed that feels sustainable. 200 miles an hour, maybe 220. If the fuel holds, they'll reach the Chinese coast in 3 hours. If. 30 minutes later, the engineer spots them first. Fighters, 2 o'clock high. Hite's blood freezes. He looks right, sees 2 aircraft diving toward them. Can't tell if they're Japanese or American. Doesn't matter, both will kill them. The fighters close fast. 1,000 yards, 500 yards. Hite pushes the stick forward, dives for the deck. The G4M plummets. 2,000 feet, 1,000 feet, 200 feet, skimming the waves. The fighters follow. Then they break off. Hite doesn't know why, doesn't care. He stays low, 50 feet above the water. Too low for radar, too low for long-range intercepts. The ocean blurs beneath them. Land appears on the horizon, the Chinese coast. The crew cheers. Hite doesn't. They're not safe yet. The fuel gauge, whatever it is, shows the needles dropping toward empty. And worse, he sees smoke rising from multiple locations along the coast. The Japanese occupied this region months ago. Hite has no idea if they're flying toward friendly territory or straight into enemy hands. The navigator studies the coastline. That's not where we're supposed to be. Where are we supposed to be? 200 miles south. The wind must have pushed them off course, or Hite's heading was wrong, or both. Either way, they're landing soon, fuel or no fuel. Hite spots a flat area, rice paddies. Not ideal, but better than mountains. He sets up for approach. No landing gear. The G4M will belly land just like the B-25 did. 100 feet. 50 feet. The bomber hits the mud at 95 miles an hour, slides 200 yards, stops. They're down. In China. Alive. The crew climbs out. No idea where they are. No idea who controls this area. Within minutes, they find out. Chinese villagers appear, cautious, armed with farming tools. Hite raises his hands. American! We're American! The villagers don't speak English, but they see the Japanese bomber, see the American flight suits. The confusion is immediate. Are these Americans who stole a Japanese plane, or Japanese pretending to be American? One villager motions toward the village. The crew follows. They're taken to a local military commander, Chinese Nationalist Army. Through broken English and hand gestures, Hite explains. Doolittle Raid, Tokyo, shot down, stole Japanese bomber, flew here. The commander doesn't believe him, but he radios his superiors anyway. 3 days later, confirmation arrives. The Americans are telling the truth. They're heroes.
Of the 16 B-25s that launched from the Hornet, all 16 were lost. 15 crash-landed in China, 1 landed in the Soviet Union. Of the 80 airmen, 3 were killed in crashes. 8 were captured by the Japanese. 3 of those captured were executed. 1 died in captivity. Robert Hite was one of the lucky ones. He made it back, but the mission succeeded. Tokyo was bombed. The Japanese homeland was no longer untouchable. American morale skyrocketed. Japanese plans were disrupted. And one Texas pilot proved that when your options are surrender or fight an enemy bomber, you steal the bomber. Hite spent the rest of the war in the Pacific, flew 32 more missions, survived them all. He returned home in 1945, married, raised a family, worked as a hotel manager in Arkansas. Never talked much about the war. When people asked about the Doolittle Raid, he'd shrug. We did what we had to. In 2015, Robert Hite died at age 95. He was one of the last surviving Doolittle Raiders. They buried him with full military honors. The citation on his headstone doesn't mention the stolen bomber, doesn't mention the impossible flight across the East China Sea. It just says, Doolittle Raider, American hero. April 18, 1942. Robert Hite's aircraft was shot down over Tokyo. He had 2 choices, bail out and hope for rescue, or do something no one expected. He chose the impossible. Landed on a Japanese-held island, stole an enemy bomber he'd never flown, took off under fire, flew 600 miles over open ocean with no navigation, no fuel gauge he could read, and no guarantee he'd survive. And he made it. Not because he was reckless, because when the options are surrender or fight, some men refuse to surrender. The story of Robert Hite isn't about stealing a bomber. It's about refusing to accept that your fate is decided by your circumstances. April 18, 1942. They shot him down over Tokyo, so he stole their bomber and flew home.